So, a big welcome to Tony, our guest speaker. Worshipful Brother Tony Harvey has held an active provincial role in the secretarial, membership, mentoring, learning and development, charity, and communication areas. Tony conceived and was the main author of the Members' Pathway, which the Provincial Grand Master has called a game changer, and which has been described on social media as one of the greatest innovations in Freemasonry in the last 100 years. Tony has held a member of Masonic lectureships, including the Prestonian Lecture in 2012 with Scouting and Freemasonry. Worshipful Brother Harvey is a Grand Officer in the Craft, Royal Arch and Mark, as well as 2 other orders. Tony, it's now over to you.
Leslie, thank you so much for that. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, much of which I'm sure will mean absolutely nothing to many of the people on here. You can just think of me as a really nice guy. So thank you for the invitation. Most Worshipful Grand Master, ladies and brethren, this is a huge honor and privilege for me to be invited to speak to you today. And I'm so pleased that you are all here. I've written this talk especially for those who wish to know more about Freemasonry and those who've recently become Freemasons. So I think we've got absolutely the right audience on here today. So what I aim to do in the next 20-25 minutes or so is, first of all, provide for you an overview of Freemasonry and its principles, and that is what it is and what it is not. I hope I can decode some of the Masonic language that you will have already heard and that you will hear again in the future. Because like anything, Freemasonry does have its own jargon or gobbledygook, even if you want to think of it like that. I also hope to outline the basic organization and functioning of Masonic lodges and beyond the lodge. What happens beyond the lodge? I want to explain something about what you see when you walk into a Masonic lodge room. And most of all, I really want to be able to address and answer as many of your questions as possible. And as Leslie has explained, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask those to me, and I'm here for as long as you want me to be to address those questions. Something I will mention right now, and I'll mention it again right at the very end, the Grand Master has given her permission for me to couple this with a fundraising appeal that I'm doing, which is raising money for Masonic charities. And later in the talk, I will give you an idea of how you might be able to make donations if you wish to do so. And I'm essentially saying, if you have found it useful, interesting, enjoyable, and you'd like to make a donation, I'll give you a link to my fundraising page. So let's crack on anyway. What is Freemasonry? Well, it's one of the world's oldest and largest social and charitable organizations. It offers a unique form of personal development, which involves a series of dramas, each of which teach philosophical lessons. And the roots of Freemasonry and its dramas lie with the medieval or operative stonemasons, and they're the people who built our cathedrals and castles. Those guys developed their own methods to train people in their profession, and they were very careful to employ only those who were properly qualified. In effect, they were an early form of quality assurance system, qualification scheme, and professional body all rolled into one. And being concerned with moral and social education, as well as occupational training, the stonemasons used stories to convey their teaching. And their dramas or ceremonies and the symbols and tools that they contain were based on stories from the building of King Solomon's Temple, which was the first major building project to be described in any real detail. Now, what we now call speculative rather than operative Freemasonry dates from the early 18th century, just over 300 years ago, and it reflects Enlightenment principles of mutual respect, tolerance, education, and self-improvement. Now, our members no longer build castles and cathedrals, at least very few of us do, and I certainly don't. But instead, what we've done is adopted and adapted the stonemasons' dramas from the medieval period to refer to building our lives and actions so that we can become better people. These dramas form the progressive steps or degrees that every new member takes. Each step conveys different social and moral principles. And the ultimate intention is to help us become the best we can be for ourselves, for our relationships with others, and so that we can make positive contributions to our communities and to society as a whole. Now, these dramas are built upon our key values or principles. Now, my organisation in Men's Freemasonry uses modern language to describe these. There is more traditional language used within our dramas, but the modern language that United Grand Lodge of England, the Men's Grand Lodge, use are as follows. First of all, integrity. And this is about building good people. So as Freemasons, we wish to build ourselves as people of integrity, and membership provides a structure to help us achieve that goal. Our second value is friendship, and this of course is about building good relationships. Freemasonry provides a common foundation for friendships between members, many of which, as Leslie has said, last for life. Thirdly, respect, and this is about building unity between people. Freemasonry brings people together, and that's irrespective of our race, our religion, or indeed any other perceived differences that tend to divide us as a society. And finally, charity. This is really about building compassion. Kindness and charitable giving are deeply ingrained within the principles of Freemasonry, and our organisation provides the structure for us to make positive contributions to our communities and various causes. Now, I mentioned that Freemasonry brings people together irrespective of our differences. Now, to be clear what I mean by that, it is open to people of all backgrounds. Freemasonry is for people regardless of their race, their upbringing, their socioeconomic status, any disability, their sexuality, or their religion. If you meet our qualifications for membership, you can join. Now, these qualifications include a minimum but no maximum age, a belief in a supreme being, and I'll come back to that, and a requirement that you live and have lived your life in obedience to the law. Freemasonry also requires members not to use our membership for personal gain. And contrary to what I sometimes see on social media, I can absolutely assure you that Freemasonry does not bestow material riches or power on its members. And I hope not too many of you are now going to leave the call as a result of that statement. Now, the original stonemasons would all have been men. So the earliest Masonic lodges were restricted to men. And starting just over 300 years ago, these lodges formed together into grand lodges, which were inevitably men only. But later, as Leslie has indicated, mixed lodges were formed, and some of which later formed a women-only Grand Lodge. So today, we have men-only lodges, women-only lodges, and mixed lodges. And each of them are part of a bigger organisation called a Grand Lodge. So we have separate Grand Lodges for each of those. And therefore, in this country at least, and indeed in many other countries, and with the growth of Freemasonry for women in an increasing number of countries, every person wishing to become a Freemason has complete choice whether they wish to be part of single-sex or mixed Freemasonry. Now, the lodges that I belong to are for men only, and we're part of the oldest Masonic authority in the world, which is the United Grand Lodge of England, known as UGLE. Now, we work closely with your Grand Lodge, which is Freemasonry for Women, to use its formal title, the Honourable Fraternity of Ancient Freemasons. And we work together to promote Freemasonry as a whole. Now, let me expand further on what I meant by irrespective of our differences. What unites us as Freemasons are our shared belief in a supreme being, our principles, and our wish to be better people. Freemasonry is not concerned with and is no substitute for religion itself. It has no theology, no religious doctrine or dogma of its own, and it does not align itself with any other religion. In fact, Freemasonry counts among its members people of all the world's faiths. All we in Freemasonry need to know is that an applicant for membership recognizes that as humans, we are not supreme, that a higher being, by whatever name they wish to call that higher being, is the source of morality and not us. Now, nor is Freemasonry concerned with its members' political views. It's sufficient to know that an applicant seeks to be a good citizen. So to prevent religious and political views dividing us, we insist that neither are discussed when we meet as Freemasons or when we are acting in our Masonic capacities. Therefore, our lodges are places where people of many different religions and many different political views can meet together in harmony, based upon what we have in common and despite those things that divide us. Now, both Leslie and I have already mentioned charity. Charitable giving of both time and money is one of Freemasonry's greatest principles. As Freemasons, we raise money by different means and at meetings and at events. Collectively, Freemasons in England and Wales donate around £40 million a year to non-Masonic good causes. So I hope this has given you a broad definition of what Freemasonry is and is not. Now, there will no doubt be a number of questions. I will happily take them soon, but let's therefore move on now for me to outline how Freemasonry is organized. Well, the first thing to understand is that Freemasonry takes place in a lodge. Now, a lodge is not a physical building or meeting room. It is the particular group of Freemasons who have joined together to create a Masonic unit. A lodge meets at regular intervals. It carries out the dramas I've referred to, and it conducts the sort of business that you would expect any local group to do, such as electing its officers for the next year and managing its accounts. Every lodge meeting is usually in two parts. We have the formal meeting, and then we have the social gathering and meal that normally follows. To become a Freemason, you have to ask two existing members of the same lodge to propose you. You then apply to join their lodge. Its existing members have to accept you. The process can take a little while, as the lodge members will want to be confident that you are a fit and proper person and someone who will gel with their particular lodge. Once they do accept you as a member, you will be introduced through the first of the dramas, which is a ceremony called initiation. And following this, you will be a Freemason for life, even if you resign from your lodge. Over time, you will go through two more ceremonies to ultimately become a Master Mason. And if you wish to go further, you can progress each year through a series of lodge offices to become the presiding officer or master of your lodge. And if you choose to do so, you can also join other branches of Freemasonry. As a member of a lodge, you will be expected to attend, participate in, and contribute to its meetings. There will be opportunities to develop your understanding of what the dramas mean and things for you to learn so that you can contribute to other members' ceremonies. Most lodges offer a structured approach to this learning with individual assistance given through a personal mentor. Now, I mentioned offices in the lodge. To explain, each members of the lodge take on different roles or offices. Each officer fulfills a particular role in one or other aspect of the lodge's life. Some officers are concerned with enacting the dramas or ceremonies, others with the management or administration of the lodge, and others with providing care and support to its members and their families. Officers are identified by the light blue collars they wear and the badge or jewel that is suspended from them. So you'll see in the image on the screen there, two of those five brethren are wearing light blue collars, and I'll come back to this a little bit later. That indicates that they are officers of that particular lodge. Each officer is also located in their own place in the lodge room during its meetings. Now, to become the presiding officer or master of your lodge, you have to have previously occupied a number of the offices concerned with the dramas or ceremonies. These offices involve a commitment to learning and then delivering at a lodge meeting the words of the drama, which we call the ritual. Every year, a different member of the lodge is elected and subsequently installed as master, and they then appoint and invest their officers for the year. So, a new member progresses through a series of offices, occupying each for a year, in order to ultimately become the master of their lodge. And by the time they're installed as the master, they should have a good all-round knowledge, rounded experience of Freemasonry, and be in a good position to give leadership to their members. So lodges in turn are part of a wider organisation of Freemasonry. I've already referred to Grand Lodges. These are the bodies which authorise and regulate Freemasonry in their particular territory. Every year, each Grand Lodge elects a Grand Master who presides over its meetings and provides overall leadership. And a Grand Master is supported by Grand Officers, who are also appointed annually in roles that are largely equivalent to those within a subordinate lodge. The Grand Master for Freemasonry for Women is Most Worshipful Brother Christine Chapman, who I'm delighted to say is on the call with us today. One of the Grand Master's roles is to issue warrants to new lodges to authorise them to meet and to make Masons. Lodges are then required to conduct their business in conformity with the rules of their own Grand Lodges. Many Grand Lodges have introduced intermediate or regional bodies between them and their lodges. So Freemasonry for Women has provinces. Each province is ruled by a provincial Grand Master, who is appointed by the Grand Master and who is supported by officers whom she appoints again annually. So, I've given you an overview of Freemasonry, its purpose and principles, and I've outlined how it is organised. I'd now like to turn to some of the more visual aspects that you will see if or when you visit a Masonic meeting place. So all lodges meet in a closed room. Outside the door stands one officer who's known as the tiler, and the tiler's role is to ensure that only Freemasons enter. Inside the door is another officer called the inner guard, who tests the qualifications of anyone whom the tiler allows to pass. Thus, we have a double lock system to ensure that our meetings remain private. The lodge meeting is a sealed environment. Phones, tablets, laptops, everything else are not allowed in order to maintain that seal. The room itself is sometimes referred to as a temple, but this is only part of the symbolism. The lodge room and all the symbols it contains represents King Solomon's temple, which, as I said, was the first major stone structure to be described in any detail. Now, if you enter a Masonic lodge room, the first thing you will probably notice is the flooring. It's what we refer to as the squared pavement. It is not the base of a gigantic game of chess, but rather one of our many symbols. It represents the progress that a Freemason makes from darkness or ignorance and prejudice to light or education and enlightenment. At each corner of the flooring, or sometimes on the walls in the corners, you are likely to see a tassel. These represent the 4 cardinal virtues, which are temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. And just as the flooring represents the floor plan and boundary of King Solomon's temple, so do the 4 cardinal virtues at its corners provide the boundary within which we are encouraged to live our lives. Our dramas or ceremonies take place on this flooring, and the candidate for each ceremony moves between different parts of the room. Which brings me to the next thing you're likely to notice, which are the 3 normally quite large pedestals. So the 3 pedestals are at the seating places of the three principal officers of the lodge. That at the furthest end from the door is for the presiding officer, the master of the lodge. The master is considered to be sat in the east. Directly opposite to the master, in the west, is sat the senior warden. And to their left, or to the master's left, halfway down the lodge room in the south, is sat the junior warden. Their respective positions mark the passage of the sun, which rises in the east, the master's position, bringing light, a new day, and a fresh start. And of course, the sun sets in the west, the senior warden's position, via the south. At each pedestal is a column supporting a candle. The columns represent three of the 5 orders of architecture. They're namely Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian. In turn, they have the symbolic meanings of wisdom, which is the attribute of the master, strength, the attribute of the senior warden, and beauty, the attribute of the junior warden. And I have to say, that often arouses a bit of a smile in men-only Freemasonry. These attributes also represent the roles and contributions of the 3 Grand Masters who together were responsible for the building of King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And they were, namely, King Solomon, King of Israel, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff. At all of our meetings, at all meetings of every lodge, on the master's pedestal will be found a book, which Freemasons refer to as the volume of the sacred law. Now, if you remember, Freemasonry is not a religion and it has no religious doctrine. However, it does require its members to believe in a supreme being. And therefore, we ask all candidates to take an oath, or what we call an obligation, on the holy book of their particular faith. We use the generic and neutral name of the volume of the sacred law rather than the name of the holy book of any particular religion. But it's not unusual to see more than one volume of the sacred law on the master's pedestal. In this case, for example, you see 3 different ones there representing 3 different religions. Now, if we turn our attention to the people in the room rather than the objects, when Freemasons attend lodge meetings, they wear distinctive regalia over their normally very smart clothing. The regalia consists of 3 components: an apron, a collar, and breast jewels. Now, every member wears an apron, and every apron has a white central skin, which echoes the working aprons of the operative masons who built the cathedrals. The badges and emblems on the aprons represent different ranks and offices that the individual Freemason has achieved. Light blue aprons are worn by master masons and by the master and past masters of lodges. Dark blue aprons are worn by those, normally past masters, who have been recognised or honoured by their provincial or grand master for their service to Freemasonry and who have subsequently become provincial or grand officers. Now, I've chosen this particular image because it shows all types of aprons. You have the white only apron, the entered apprentice's apron. You have a white apron further up with 2 rosettes. That's a fellow crafts apron. You have the master mason's apron, past master's aprons, and provincial and grand officers' aprons. I won't go into each of them in great detail, but you can see a good representation of different aprons there and a number of collars. So just moving on to collars, you'll see that some members wear large collars around their neck or on their shoulders. If the collar is light blue, it indicates that the member is an officer or past master of that particular lodge. Dark blue collars are worn by provincial and grand officers. Now, you'll also notice that some are wearing breast jewels, although in this image, a number of the breast jewels are worn on collars. They're normally worn on the dress, or in our case, on a suit. The breast jewels may at first glance appear similar to military or civilian medals. They're worn on the left breast and indicate other Masonic achievements, such as being a founder or a past master of a lodge. All members are expected to wear formal wear. We men wear a dark suit, black shoes, a white coloured shirt, and either a black tie or an approved tie that represent our lodge, province, district, or Grand Lodge. Women wear a long black skirt and black top or a full-length black formal dress. The self-discipline required for a uniformly smart dress helps to concentrate the mind on the meeting and its proceedings. It also minimises displays of a member's material wealth or his or her status outside of Freemasonry. Now, I've left to last an issue that may well be on many people's lips, and this is the role of secrecy in Freemasonry. We Freemasons meet in private. We do not meet in secret. Our existence is well known. Our meeting places are open, and our members are encouraged to acknowledge and talk about their membership, providing they do not use membership to seek material gain or benefit. However, we do restrict our meetings to those who are already Freemasons and those who are being admitted as members. Now, this is because our various degree ceremonies make a deep and lasting impact on those who experience them for the first time. They're examples of experiential learning, and their significance would be lost if they were turned into public theatre to be witnessed by those who've not shared those experiences themselves. To enable us to restrict our meetings to members only, we adopt the same techniques as those used hundreds of years ago by the medieval stonemasons. They wanted to ensure that only qualified craftsmen were employed on building projects. However, as those craftsmen tended to be illiterate, there was no point issuing them with written certificates. So instead, they used a system of trade secrets, what we call modes of recognition. And these comprise a series of particular signs or movements of the hands, together with tokens or handshakes and words for each degree ceremony. We still use these distinctive modes of recognition today within our ceremonies, and we use them to distinguish Freemasons of one degree from those of another, and to test a candidate's qualifications for progression to the next degree. To prevent unqualified people from being admitted to a lodge meeting or to a ceremony in a higher degree, every Freemason is entrusted with these modes of recognition of a particular degree as part of that ceremony. When they take that obligation of that degree, they promise not to reveal its modes of recognition to those not qualified. If they then wish to visit a lodge where they're not known, they're asked to demonstrate those modes of recognition as a means of entry. So, I've told you something about Freemasonry, what it is and what it isn't. I've explained how we're organised, and I've given you an insight into some of the visual aspects of Freemasonry. For good measure, I've also revealed the role of secrecy in Freemasonry without revealing any secrets. Now, I'm keen to answer your questions, and I'll very happily address any issue that you wish to raise, and I mean any issue except one. Despite the title of this talk, please do not ask me to reveal those modes of recognition that we use to recognise other Freemasons, or to describe in any detail our ceremonies, because if I was to do that, not only would I be breaking the obligation which I made, but it would also spoil the experience of those who subsequently join and become Freemasons themselves. So for everything else, I'm all yours, and it's back to you now, Leslie, and onwards and upwards, as we say.
Tony, thank you so much for that brilliant and informative talk. Absolutely fantastic. And so if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask us, please do contact us.